Awesome.
Oh, ha 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 ha.
Hello. Welcome to another what is this? Lesson,
Lesson
Two.
Educational.
meeting, whatever, of the DMing Academy. As we are so professional. I am your headmaster, Dogood, along with my other teachers. If you guys want to reintroduce yourselves.
Greetings, I am Weaponized Teaspoon. Do we need to say more than that because we already said it?
Okay.
I am Mr. Dr. Professor Words, or you can call me Words for Sale, because that's where I am basically everywhere on social media. And also from Stream of Many Things, where I DM on Wednesdays and play in a couple games. So,
If you don't call him Mr. Dr. Professor Words each and every time, you get detention.
basically, yes.
Oh, well, even
If
the
you miss
teachers.
even just one of those honorifics, detention.
Even the teachers get in trouble.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
The teachers get special detention, though.
Oh my. Wait, not that kind of stream.
PG.
It would just be weird to have teachers and students in the same detention hall. Jeez.
God. Yeah. And for some reason, this glitch is back. I thought we got rid of this last time.
No, we adopted him.
No,
Oh, all right then. Hi, glitch.
hello there. I'm Glitch, or Glitch the Music Man, here on Twitch and on TikTok. If you're looking for me, or you can find me here with these lovely others, trying to teach people how to DM and how to be prepared for it.
I've got to cover that product placement.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Yeah, not sponsored.
Hashtag
Wait.
unless.
You want product placement?
Whoa. Mr. Dr. Professor Words, are you sure we're allowed to show that?
Yes, I approve of it.
It's his own stock. So, I believe the first topic for today is roleplay.
Wait. You're saying there's role playing involved in D&D?
Did you not know this?
I mean, if you're into that kind of thing.
How dare you put role playing in my role playing game?
Big words.
So
Down, put it down.
now you can call me King.
Mr. Dr. Professor Words, king of.
Everything.
Oh my god. Right.
I'm just
Okay.
roleplaying my character. Like, that's what we do, right?
Dress up. Oh, I don't dress up. Oh, I suppose.
Oh, wait. There's not costumes involved?
I mean, there's
I mean,
something kind
It's
of-
a very
I mean-
different roleplay.
No latex. Right. So, words, do you want to start?
Sure. On a little more topical point of what we are actually discussing today.
Gee.
So roleplay is a very pinnacle part of D&D, and as a DM, it's your job to facilitate opportunities for your players to engage in character development, character growth, interactions, not with just the other players, but with the world itself. So you also have to have some roleplay ability. You, depending on your players, will determine how much roleplay you're going to have to actually engage in. Because some players, they just want to be murder hobos and kill a bunch of things. Other players, they really like roleplay, and that's what they play the game for. So as a DM, you're going to have to be able to be flexible and accommodate a variety of play styles. And sometimes you will have players that are a mixture of the two. So you're going to have to be able to give the players that want roleplay the roleplay, and give the players that want combat. And combat's also a great place for roleplay as well, which we will get into as we progress. So a great thing to help with your role play skills is developing characters for your NPCs. So like, yes, there will be times where you will have to make an NPC up on the spot. And that's part of DMing, because maybe your players like want to go to a library and go look for smut, and you have to completely create this library and NPC and titles of books and things of that nature on the fly. I'm referencing actually a true story that Matt Mercer mentions in an interview he recently did, because that whole thing with Caleb was improv. Like, I wasn't prepared, which is kind of what we do. Now, what helps is like visualizing that character. What do they look like? How tall are they? What race are they? If they're a Goliath, they're going to be bigger. So you can visualize their appearance, what they look like. They're going to be bigger. So as far as like formulating the voice of that character, that's going to help you kind of immerse yourself into that character's personality and like how they're going to act. What is their job? Are they a soldier? Are they a librarian? Are they a dock worker or anything of that nature? Those are all kind of personality things that you can utilize. Like a dock worker might be a little bit more crass, hard-edged. Their voice might be a little bit more gruff and gravelly, so you can kind of play into that.
From all that sea air.
Yeah.
But no, like we were saying, I think the accents as well play a huge part. Obviously, it depends on whether you can do voices, but that helps when doing, like you say, the personalities of the NPCs. I usually try and put at least like obviously reserve your main accents for maybe more important NPCs, but just have like a small range of ones you can just switch between. Like maybe if you want to do like a northern accent and then try and do like a very southern accent for someone else, sort of thing.
Yeah, and like as far as like voicing your characters, like as a DM, one of the biggest things is you don't have to be Matt Mercer, because Matt Mercer's a professional voice actor and he's going to be able to do a lot more than like the average person, because he's paid to do it. If you recycle 3 or 4 voices, that's perfectly fine, as long as you give that attempt and that immersion for your players, because then that's going to help your players be comfortable to do it as well. Because if you're doing the voices, they're gonna kind of adapt to your energy. So the more energy you put into the role play, the more energy they are going to put in the role play, and vice versa. So like it's gonna so if you're able to work off your players, that really helps getting comfortable with actually getting into the character and role playing. Sometimes it gets a little uncomfortable even for me, for like when you have 2 NPCs in the room and they have to interact with each other, and you kind of have like this Smeagol Gollum moment, but just run with it. So
no, that's a pain. I sometimes struggle with that, but if you can just like you said, keep those like a couple reserved accents for that, then you can do the little switch between the two. It doesn't even have to be that much different, but sometimes it just helps that you can get those personalities across. Like one of them might be really nice, and then the other one might be really a bit of a trying to keep it PG, but but not a very nice person.
But yeah, we were talking earlier about finding your voice for the character, and that's really, that helps a lot with creating a personality of a character as well. Because like a voice is more than just a voice. Like it's the full body. Like when you're, say, like if it's a kind of person with a hunch, like you're gonna want to like get down and like, what if they're an older person and let's say maybe they're a Goliath, an old Goliath that's been through a lot. You're gonna try to find a voice for this character, and Goliath's already gonna have this deeper voice, and then you add the hunch and the age and you gravel in the voice, and like you can just play with things. And like if you can just lower the octave of your voice, then you can just add things to it to give it that little bit extra personality. And all of this is like practice and warming up.
Yeah. I mean, like as well, with that tone of voice, always focus on, like you said, the size of the characters. So if you've got quite a small character, they're going to have a bit of a higher pitched voice or a higher tone of voice than obviously a guy who's like 6-7 foot tall, or a woman, somebody that's very, very tall is going to have more of a deeper voice. So again, it's just looking obviously at the physical aspects of your character as well, I find. So like my when I used to play a Dragonborn, and he was like towards the top end of the scale and towards the height of Dragonborns, like he was one of the tallest there, and I gave him quite a deep voice like this, and because he stood up tall, it's better to, obviously when you alter your posture, it's easy to get a different voice out for what you're trying to do.
Like another example, like I have a Dragonborn that I'm playing right now, but he was raised by druids, so he actually is kind of like speaks a little bit more proper and higher pitch, but not like super high, just airy.
Yeah.
So that's a part of figuring out like how you're going to play a character, especially for your main NPCs. Like your off the top of your head NPCs, just kind of you can recycle voices. It's not going to be an issue. Be that Officer Jenny or Nurse, Nurse from Pokemon. Like you can do that with your one-off NPC. Your important NPCs. Flesh out those characters.
I was going to say that it's weird, isn't it? The nurse is the exact same person in every town.
No, it's not. They're just all very, very, very similar looking.
No, it's the same person. But no, oh dear me. But like also when it comes to roleplay, don't be scared to say things that you normally wouldn't say in real life. Like, things that you obviously wouldn't. Let's say you're quite a kind-hearted person, and you would normally try and help people wherever you could, and the character you're trying to portray is quite a selfish or not a nice person. Some people struggle to do that, whereas, you've got to try and get out your comfort zone when you're doing that. Like, I used to struggle doing this when I used to play not like nasty, really nasty characters, and I used to be like, I don't know whether I should do this or not. But you've got to get out of that comfort zone and really do it. I mean, you could also use. Yeah, true.
So, and just kind of on the voicing, you don't have to follow atypical things. We're just talking mostly basics. So like,
yeah,
that's where, getting used to voicing a character, then you can kind of play with different ways of voicing a character. Like you don't have to stick to a certain stereotype. But yeah, we're just, a lot of this stuff right now that we're talking about, especially, in the earlier episodes that we will be more basic information to get people at least started with getting comfortable with DMing and things of that nature. But kind of going back to like how to actually act as that character, that's especially with your BBGs and your main NPCs and things like that. Find a character questionnaire or make one yourself. I actually have one that I've made because I'm a writer, so like I create characters all the time, and that helps you answer questions like, what is their motivation? Where did they grow up? Were they poor? Were they rich? Were they, What do they believe in? Do they have any disabilities? Do they have any like important events in their life that affected them? Do they have any friends, family? Were they divorced? Did they have children? Like, you go through and you ask all these questions, and it fleshes out this character, and that's going to flesh out how they're going to act. Because if they're a war veteran that has seen a lot of war and all their friends and family are dead, they're probably going to act a little bit not so friendly, maybe at first. Like, maybe they have that deep down kindness, but on the surface, they may be harder to approach. They may be harder to persuade to do things.
They may even have like just something obviously not quite right upstairs as well. Like, they could have a few issues you could play on, because any like trauma like that's going to obviously affect somebody. So you could add in like little quirks and maybe even tics or things like that they might have. So,
and when you're actually speaking in your character, like, use your body too. If it's that's going to add that immersion. That's going to help with conveying that emotion and things like that. It's going to help you kind of get into that character a bit more too. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to, it's just one of those tools that, like, once you start getting used to, like, it's really going to enhance the experience for yourself and your players.
Do you guys want to add anything to that at all? What we've covered so far? Because you've sat very quietly, very patiently.
At the head.
Well, there's a lot that we can cover. If they don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you don't want to add just yet, we can always wait.
And if anybody has any questions, as our headmaster there mentioned in chat, feel free to ask questions. We will get to them.
Absolutely.
There's.
I'll keep an eye out for him. I've got my phone up with it all, so I can see the chat and everything.
Now, one thing to remember about roleplay as well is knowing when to end a scene and knowing when to knowing the mood, when to do a scene, when to end it, when to push a story forward, things of that nature. And that can be kind of difficult at times, especially if you feel like the role play is important, but like maybe things are getting discussed that shouldn't be yet. Like, you don't want them to, like, maybe your players are kind of exploring things that may affect the story that you're trying to tell, and which is fine, and you want them to, but you do kind of want to have a bit of influence in something. So like if they're getting too close to like a hook, then you can always interrupt that with an NPC or something like that nature, and that's going to add tension. That's going to add that confusion and like, oh no, like we weren't able to actually finish this scene, we weren't able to finish this conversation, and it was really important, but now you've interrupted it, and now they have to focus on something else, and that's going to add to that story. It's going to add to their experience and have that wonder. And like if you keep them busy long enough, they may forget about it, and then you can hit them with it later. Those are really good little elements that you can do to enhance the role play for the characters.
True. I think I've probably actually got a good example of this. Basically, what I did was they actually entered a bar, and I had the idea that one of the this right hand man of the big bad evil guy would be sat in the bar waiting basically for him. So he went and sat down with him, and they had their little conversation. Before he could do anything to him, I had the bartender interrupt them so he could slip out behind them. Just so, yes, they can't capture him now.
Yeah. Things of that nature. That's a good question. We will get to that here in a second when we get into some of the combat discussion. But yeah, we'll definitely address that. Another thing that you can do with roleplay, it's called showing and telling.
Yes.
So, like, as a role player, you don't always have to just say what the character is saying. You know, you can describe the scene as well. Like, how are they feeling? What's their posture? What are they doing? Are they flipping a knife in the air as they're speaking? Are they, trying to hold back tears? Are they in pain? Are they leaning against the wall? Like, those are all going to be adding elements to like
Stop stealing my little thing that I told you earlier.
Slight reference, but those are going to add
No,
elements.
I'll let you finish. I'll explain the reference to that because it's quite funny, actually.
Yeah. Those are going to add elements to your character, and that's going to help you kind of convey things in a way that you may not, like, if you're not feeling comfortable with actually like speaking the words. Like, you can be like, my character, walks up to the bar and he leans forward, he sighs, and then he says, and then you can say the words, but you don't, if you don't feel like acting it out, you can still have those little elements that is going to still enhance and give the scene in the DM and other players' mind of like what's happening.
I mean, but no, as well. So when you're doing these, like, maybe actions instead of talking. So, like you say, if you don't feel comfortable, you just do something, like let them crack on role playing. Sometimes what you might do a lot, like quite often, and sometimes you can play on that and as a staple or something that your character is always going to do. So it just kind of builds the character. And I have an experience with this with one of my players, which is what I spoke to you about earlier, words.
Yep.
Was he basically, whenever we walked in to a bar or any building that was non-hostile, that we're going somewhere for information, he would find a wall and he would lean against a wall. That's it. And that would be him for the rest of the scene because he wasn't a big fan of roleplay. So it just gets to this point where eventually I just go, it's all right, I know what you're doing. You go and lean on that wall. And eventually, you just end up building up these little quirks and almost in sometimes catchphrases if it's words. But it just kind of builds your character more, I think, and helps people understand him or her.
If you don't feel like acting things out, you can be a bit more descriptive with things, until you get a little bit more comfortable. One of the great things about roleplay is one of the I guess biggest rules of roleplay that I feel is the most important thing to have in your toolbox is the yes and that is an improv staple. That is like the number one thing for improvisation is always do yes and, because that's going to keep things driving forward. And what that means is if someone tells you just a random thing like, why did you drink that drink? And like maybe you're at a bar and you haven't got just like a random, it's like, why'd you drink that drink? It's like, well, it was delicious. It's like, well, they had poison in it. It's like, but like, and you just keep that conversation going and going that back and forth. So if someone says something to you and like, instead of just stopping it, instead of saying like no, or staying, that's not what my character would do, or anything like that nature, yes, and it in a way that's going to make your character, the way you want it to be. So like if they say, oh, your character's such an like, it's like, oh, you were so mean then. It'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be mean. I guess my, if my tone was, harsh, I didn't really mean to do that. Like, that's not the type of person I am. That's a yes and, you're not just shutting down. It's like, no, I wasn't mean. Like, if you just go, no, I wasn't mean. Like, that's going to end the scene, and that's going to kill the role play. So just
elaborate.
Yeah, kind of think of how your character is going to react to things instead of just having instead of metagaming. Essentially, like, you're metagaming your own character. Like, if you have a idea of how your character is, and then someone else's character perceives your character wrong, well, that's just like that's a role play thing. That's not a slight against you or your character.
See, sometimes metagaming's okay. Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, like,
I mean, as the DM, it's kind of your job to metagame.
Yeah,
well, that's different. We're okay too. Players know.
Yeah. If if and that's another. I was actually going to say something that was applied to. I have so many thoughts in my brain.
It's all right. We all have these moments when the thought just decides to go in one ear and just goes that way 100 miles. So
yeah, so like the whole metagaming side of things, your NPCs are designed a certain way. As a DM, don't change it. Don't change it to fit your players. If you built an NPC that is only willing, like, no matter what the player is going to do, or they're only willing to do this one thing, or they're not willing to do this or whatever, and like that's a character thing, unless they nat 20 on something, and that might persuade them enough, but like, don't give them too much if that's the design of the character. If they're a very stubborn person, like, play them stubborn. Don't just give in because it's easier. And that's another thing, is like, that's kind of like that metagaming thing, is like, well, I need to give them this information, but this character is not the right character to give it to them, or they're asking the wrong questions, or they're insulting your NPC, or like they're treating this NPC in a way that you didn't expect them to, so your NPC is just not going to like help them now. Like, you designed it to help them, but now they're not, because your players are being jerks. Like, use that. Like, that's part of the yes and.
I think as well with what will be important is obviously your out of character and in character decisions. Because you've really got to be careful and obviously got to make sure that you let them know this is going to be, obviously, we don't need to let them know, but you need to know the difference between out of character and into character. My brain's just done the exact same thing. Why are you doing this to me?
Sorry. We're just feeding off each other's brains.
Where's the coal? Where's the coal? I need it. Go on. But yeah, so when you're doing the out of character stuff, don't give away too much, I would say. Really try not to. Obviously, once you start giving too much away, that's when you're basically metagaming yourself out of everything, and they just basically get away with everything. So finding that line to give what information is key, I would say. Like, basically, stuff that they don't.
Yeah, I think. I mean, basically, just kind of recap what we've talked about so far. As far as roleplay, it can be uncomfortable. A lot of us have gone through that, especially, I'm a player and a DM.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been on both sides of the table. And there is a discomfort to it. Learn your characters that you want to develop. So especially like your main NPCs, flesh them out, give them a backstory. You don't have to write like a 5-page story about them, but like, figure out who they are as a character and play them as that character. And that's going to help you think with things like developing your voice for that character. So like, are they a child? Are they a Goliath? Are they a human? Are they a sailor? Are they a swashbuckler? All these things are characteristics that's going to help you develop the voice, which is going to help you develop the character. Just kind of remember the yes and rule. If your players give you something, run with it. Don't deny them. Don't shut them down, because that's going to kill the scene, and it's also going to discourage your players.
Yes. You don't. I absolutely agree with that, because obviously once you start discouraging players, that's when you start getting breakdown in team. I've had that multiple times with my most recent group, where I've kind of said something and I think they've took it the wrong way, personally, in some aspects. But as well, I find it's better as well to encourage the players to probe, like giving them little hints, so it makes them probe more, and it makes them interact with the NPCs more as well. Just dropping subtle things that won't give too much away.
Okay, that's actually, well, we can kind of cover that question right now since we're on that topic.
Yeah.
So breaking a player out of their shell, that is one of those things that you're going to have to be kind of delicate with. That's going to be at the table and off the table. Communication is always going to be the most important thing with your as a DM. So if you notice that a player is being quiet, do not spotlight them at the table, because that's going to make it worse for them. That's going to discourage them. That's going to make them even more uncomfortable, and honestly, that could even potentially make them want to leave. So if you notice them being quiet, you can throw them like soft things at them just to give them opportunities. If they don't really respond, then leave them alone. After the game, talk to them on a one-on-one situation in private. Say, hey, I noticed you're quiet. You weren't really interacting. What's going on? Is there anything I can do to help you be more comfortable at the table? Let them tell you, because if you just start throwing things at them, you're more than likely going to be wrong. And that's just, you don't want to risk that. You want everyone to be comfortable.
See, I tend to throw mundane stuff at them, like just say to them, like, "What are you doing?" Just something as simple as that, like.
Yeah, those are the soft things. Yeah. But you don't want to just like make an NPC run up to him and be like, throw like a really intense roleplay session with them. You're like, hey, like, what's your character doing right now? And if they just want to give like a 2-sentence response, let them. You want them to grow with that comfort.
Definitely. And it's also finding as well, like you say, breaking those people out of their shells. I mean, my partner, when they're playing with me, well, I remember when we did the first game together, she was more involved with the roleplay than me. And I've been playing for a lot longer than them, so she got straight into the roleplay so quickly. But then we also had another new player who we had to slowly bring in, and I think as well you can encourage the players to help them in some aspects if it's not too involving in their situation. Like, kind of give them a bit of encouragement, I think.
Yeah, and like, so like with D&D, like.
Oh, hang on. Carry on. My computer's just gone weird.
Okay. Things in D&D, they can get intense, especially with a story-driven thing. So as a roleplay, situation, and as a DM, as you cultivate a story, and like if you start dealing with things that are very traumatic, if you start dealing with things that are high emotion, you want all of your players to be
we're good.
you want your players to be in a position to where they're comfortable and they are in the right headspace to be able to handle those kinds of situations. On the first stream that we talked about consent forms. That's a great place to start to be able to cultivate a story that's going to be comfortable with everybody. But even when they give consent, you still want to make sure they're okay to move forward with certain situations. Or if you put them through a situation, after care and making sure that afterwards they are okay. Check in with your players, because you don't want to constantly throw trauma and throw high emotion situations at them, and they get worn down and beat up, and like they're struggling internally, but they want to keep going because they're engaged, but like they're not taking care of themselves. Like you are responsible for them. Like, yes, you're doing this to them, So and while it's a separation of player and character, people are always going to get attached. It's still emotional. And it's emotional for you. So like it's not just you managing your players, but making sure that you are okay too. So and that's a really big part of role play, is making sure everybody is in the right headspace, everyone is comfortable, and knowing when to, like I said before, end a scene, knowing when to have a scene. Like if your players are seeing a bit off, don't throw something at them that's gonna.
I want to say, I think we covered this last time, didn't we? Like a similar sort of thing, ensuring that they're all right and that. Yeah. I mean, I tell them if you're uncomfortable with something that has happened in game, stop me right there and then and tell me that, or even just drop me a text through the chat and I'll just quickly skip that scene and get it over and done with.
Yeah.
Then I'll talk to them afterwards. But I think as well, if obviously the viewers that are in, if they are in Ivy's server and obviously they wanted to become a DM, download that consent form, because they are lifesavers, and it's good to also pop it over to them, get them to fill it in, because then you can pre-arrange.
Yeah. I guess.
Oh, we've got another question.
No, I think
we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this, but separate yourself from your characters. That's the biggest thing too. Don't take anything personally. So if you create these NPCs that you want to engage with your players, make sure that none of them are you're too attached to, because you don't know what's gonna happen to them. Your players might kill them, or they might be put in a situation that or you have to do a roleplay session that's pretty intense for yourself. Like, separate yourself from them, and make sure your players are doing the same.
Yes,
because it can very easily get personal if people are not aware of that. Because, like, especially players, they're playing the same character every single session for months, years. They're going to get attached. So
yes,
make sure they're not getting too attached, because it's all about...
I pre-warn with different, because I think it was with different games, it will depend on how attached you should get. Because I think in D&D, your characters are a lot harder to die, I find. Because it's a lot harder to kill someone off in D&D, and another game called Savage Worlds. Like, your characters are quite tough, and you can get kind of attached to them in a way. But I find other games like Cyberpunk, Morkborg, things like this, your characters are going to die quite often. So I've pre-warned players, do not get attached to your characters, because characters die quite often in these games. So obviously build that little bit of a background, but just be prepared. It's good. It always looms constantly in those games.
And I think that covers quite a bit, especially as like on a beginning perspective of things. There's so much nuance and details and things that you can incorporate to roleplay that will enhance it. But if you're just starting out, or even if you have a little bit of experience, all of this stuff is going to help you cultivate kind of a better engaging roleplay experience for yourself and your players. Now, on the subject of combat, I know we're going to go more into combat, and but I kind of want to touch on the roleplay side of combat, because since we're talking about roleplay right now.
Yes.
So the question that you asked is really good. How does one roleplay combat? Some people don't know how to, because D&D, the way the rules are, it does make it a little bit difficult, because it's really mechanical.
There's no guidelines in the books about how to roleplay combat. It just shows you this is what you're supposed to roll, this is what it does.
Yeah.
There's no real roleplay aspect to it, except for a couple of spells that actually have some kind of description about how you cast them.
I think with the talking in combat, I think that's more down to a DM yourself on whether you want to really play it by the rules, because obviously each round, is it 6 seconds, or each turn 6 seconds?
Yeah.
Something like that. So a lot of people, a lot of DMs I find will say you can only say what you can fit in that time frame. And I personally think, well, if it's relevant, that's fine. I'll let it slide. But if it's to say something to a character in terms of like an order, then keep it in that time frame.
So, what I was going to say, yes, it can be very straightforward because it's mechanical. However, there are plenty of opportunities for you to encourage roleplay elements into combat. One of the things that I try to do, sometimes I forget, but when the player attacks, let them describe the attack. That's going to be a roleplay element for them, and then you can react to that. If there's a intense scene going on, let the players communicate between each other. Talking is a free action. It always is. So your players can talk to each other, but they can't have a full-on conversation, because each turn is 6 seconds. So they may have time for a couple sentences, and if they start talking too long, then you can actually, as a DM, have something happen, that way those are things that they can do to kind of enhance that experience. I really do like kind of the critical role thing of how Caleb will describe him pulling out the material components or whatever, and how Caleb uses those components, because each sorcerer may use the same components, but they may use it differently.
Yes.
So those are little elements that you can encourage, and you can talk to your players of hey, try to think about these things. Some people, they just want to get over combat. They just want to get in, get out. But on the roleplay side of things, you can play with those few things, and that can help build other ideas.
True. Oh dear. I don't think there's any. Is there any more? No, it's not.
Yeah, there's not really.
I'll get more into detail about that, because I already have bullet points for combat stuff.
You have bullet points for everything normally.
I like to be prepared.
Yeah.
Except when I'm
We all like
actually
being
DMing again.
prepared. We all like being prepared, but you have bullet points for bullet points. For bullet points. For bullet points. For bullet points.
Yes, but how fast did I make up those bullet points? It took me 5 minutes, okay?
Just one point of metagaming and role-playing. Your character's not a mind reader, unless, they're using a mind reading spell. But, if one of your player, if you as a DM know something, doesn't mean your characters do. Same thing with the players.
Yeah.
So
I that's one big thing with players that I do penalize them on. So if they are playing on knowledge that I've possibly shared with them another time, Do you know what I mean? Like, or like accidentally slipped out and said, "You obviously cannot act on that." When you say it like out of game, sometimes you let things slip because loose lips. But
or like, yeah,
but then they start acting on it, even when I've told them don't act on it, please, because you're not supposed to know that. And then they do it anyway, and you're just like, "Are you really pushing my patience now?"
that or if two of your players have a scene where nobody else is, but
Yes.
then the other party members start acting on that. Those are things.
You're here as well? Well, who's doing this? It's like, well, I'm doing that. Well, you're not here then, are you?
Yeah. So, yeah, that just popped in my head. That's a good thing to keep in mind. Do you want to take
too many examples of that, by the way? But yeah, go on, carry on. Sorry.
Good old headmaster. Do you want to go into combat now, or do you want to?
I actually have a couple things I'd like to add on to roleplay.
Okay.
So one thing that I don't think I heard mentioned was about the fact that when you're creating these NPCs and yes, you should have as much as you can written down about how you want certain NPCs to be, and others you're gonna have to make up on the fly. Not every NPC has to be the super memorable person. Like, not everyone's got to be the super ultimate arch wizard of awesomeness. There could be soldier number 6, just with a generic guard voice telling them, "Hey, you, stop stealing stuff."
I think we did. I don't think we addressed it specifically, but we had little pointers for that. Like I said, that's reserve voices for more important NPCs, and then when you get to your generics, just have a select few.
Yeah, I reserve the. We basically emphasized it the other way around. I was like, reserve your detail to the important NPCs, and then so it pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
different way of looking at it.
Don't be afraid to have a bunch of generics. Not every NPC has to be super dramatic or funny or super plot relevant.
And sometimes they end up being the favorite.
Yeah.
I honestly, in my game on Wednesday, I made this character that didn't really have a whole lot behind the character other than that his name was Rice. He talked in the third person, and he was just this chaotic gnome fighter. I did not want this character to really be other than that, just kind of those little one-off moments in these background scenes.
And everyone fell in love with Rice.
Well, I made the mistake because he's very pompous and arrogant, and he said that he was immortal as a one-off. I'm so arrogant, I'm gonna of course I won, I'm immortal. Well, the players decided to test that theory.
Oh no.
And both attacks that they did on this gnome failed, which only reinforced the fact that he was indeed immortal.
Oh my God.
So, that stuff happens. And then you could have characters that you set up that were super important or would give them a lot more information, and they just don't even talk to them. That happens too. So
just fuels the ego of Rice. Just come on, Rice, grow.
As a player in the Wednesday campaign, it was just no.
It was pure chaos.
No, I have a particular bartender, because obviously I do a Star Wars on Tatooine, and no matter what, they could literally be miles from this bar, in another town, and if they want to go for a drink, they will specifically get in their shuttle and go to this specific bar because they fell in love with this bartender. I don't know why, because he's the most generic bartender you can possibly get.
Yeah, so things like that happen.
Yeah,
they definitely do.
Anything else you wanted to add?
Also, I know we mentioned about breaking shy players out of their shell, but it's also a lot like how we're going to discuss in combat, keeping track of where everyone is. Role playing is the same. You got to keep track of where all the characters are and what they're doing. And sometimes you need to make sure that everyone gets some kind of limelight, even if it's something small in a session, so that they don't feel like they're just a spectator in their own game.
Yeah.
Some people are silent because they're shy. Others are silent because they don't see a place where they can interject something. And as the DM, it would be your job to create something for them to be able to do. Like if the party's doing something in a town, you could say, okay, and Rice, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
A simple little just gesture over to them of what would you like to be doing right now.
Rice wants to brag that he's immortal.
He sends...
You know what? Check out Stream of Many Things on Wednesday. See how immortal Rice is.
Yeah, because next session, that's essentially where they left off, is someone punched him in the face and failed, and so it just stopped.
Because I haven't had my attack on him yet.
Can we just fireball Rice and see what happens?
You may not get it.
I might not. I might cry if that happens, but I'm okay with that.
Just fireball Rice and see what happens.
He'll pop up later, and I'll just kill him later.
I didn't have a character sheet for Rice, but now I do.
Oh no.
Well, you
if
have
we
to
manage to kill him, or whenever the campaign ends, I'd love to see the character sheet.
Yeah. Let's see what happens.
Just it literally gets to it. It's like he had the best sword in the game. What did he have? A Vorpal sword. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we all have at least one really good role-playing moment story. Why don't everyone who's in the chat, if you have a role-playing question you'd like to ask, feel free to ask it now, and we'll take turns saying like a short story while you guys ask questions.
I'd like to cover
have any.
I think one of my favorite role-playing stories of all time has to be, and I wasn't even role-playing a character. We were simply role-playing a scene where they were investigating something, and it was the very first session of my Star Wars campaign. And basically what happened is they just defeated a bunch of people in the bad guys in this building and what have you. And they go downstairs. I said there was, I was like, I've not prepared for this. So I thought, oh, we'll do this. So they go downstairs and there's this little, there's this black dome with an aerial and a blinking light and a keyboard on it. So they roll their technologies to see what it is. One of them rolls a 2, the other one rolls a 5. Not good. So the one who rolls a 2 confidently strolls up. He says, I press a button. Okay, nothing happens. I press another button. Nothing happens. I press another button, getting continuously frustrated as he goes, and he goes, nothing happens. And they go, I put my hand on the left side of the keyboard and I run my hand from one side to the other. What happens? And I go, the red light starts blinking faster. It was a tracking beacon. They got swarmed by droids. It worked.
I think one of my favorite moments is actually more recently, is in my Sunday game that I'm a player in. I'm playing a cleric paladin bugbear.
Okay.
And one of the other players, Patrick Waller, is playing a kobold. That is a druid, but it's a homebrew druid that can shift into a dragon. And the kobold's like, he is a dragon, or they are a dragon. So the first thing that this kobold said to my character was that, oh, he's an ugly one. My character, part of his backstory is like that he always hears like veiled insults like into everything that he said, because he's always been like persecuted as being a bugbear in the Night Order. And So immediately, these two characters were just going at it, like just back and forth bickering, and just the interaction between the characters have been really fun and engaging because like there is depth behind it, but even though there is this tension between these two characters, which they may end up fighting at some point with how much tension there is, it adds that uniqueness to the party because now we have to work together when we don't like each other. So yeah, like I really like that dynamic. So like now I have to figure out, okay, is my character going to still work with this party? And through the combats that we've had, the kobold, even though they insulted him, did shift into a dragon. My bugbear thinks he's a false dragon, and that it's some form of profane magic.
Just give me a few minutes. I'll be back in a minute, but carry on. Carry on.
But like, he recognizes the power and the ability. So it's like now my character has like this internal conflict of like, oh no, like I don't like this character because the order that he's a part of was of a silver dragon that was supposedly the last dragon. So like there shouldn't be any more dragons. So this dragon must be false. So now he has like this internal conflict of like, is he a real dragon? Like they're really powerful, but they also insulted me. But we're in this place. We're in Barovia. You know, it's a Curse of Strahd. Like it's one of those things. It's like now I have to develop my character a little bit more. Those are really fun, engaging roleplay moments.
Mine is probably, should I say from this past Thursday or the one before that? Because those were just two beautiful roleplay sessions. I'll do the one from last week. So, I decided to give my players a couple sessions off of like super big combat because they're about to do immense amounts of combat starting not next session but the session after to like deadliest deadly scale. So they're in the main city of the country and I asked them, okay, it's getting close to nighttime. What would you guys like to do with your evening? One of my players says, I want to go to Olive Garden, which I did not have. So I created, instead of a ye olde Olive Garden, because trademark, I changed the name to Grapevine, and as they were walking and doing minor bits of role play, I created a whole staff. They got to Grapevine, asked for a table. I said, okay, it'll be about like an hour wait because, you know, it's a restaurant and it's nighttime. They decided, nope, we're not waiting. Let's go to Taco Bell. So I then had to make a Taco Bell for them that I called Burrito Horn because I was just pulling it right out of my ass. Created a whole restaurant for them to sit down in and eat and role play amongst themselves. And the only real NPC of note, because there was, I think, 4 or 5 different NPCs in that scene, was their server that they basically almost made cry. It was like a 16-year-old, just part-timer. What can I get for you? And just their interactions with him and with each other at the table, it was just pretty amazing roleplay. And Smiling, I see you in the chat. If you wanted the chicken pasta, you would have waited the hour.
Nice.
Glitch, any roleplay stories you'd like to?
Got more than a few stories. since it's a hard choice going for which one is the best, I'll go with the one that is probably the most recent for me. This was my my current home game that I've got going. The party got split. About half of them went to an arena where they ended up fighting a combat that was a little bit challenging for them, but definitely revealed some interesting story events. Returned back after this, which when all of these story pieces started to come together as the two groups started to converse in what became a pretty intense conversation where everyone all ended up in one character's room along with one NPC conversing on how to bring down the elite of a city, as they had found out they were doing some not so nice things. That was probably the most intense one I've had lately, and it got rather interesting.
Nice.
All right, so I think here's where we're gonna go into our break, and when we come back, we'll get into our combats lesson.
Mortal Kombat.
All right, welcome back to DMing Academy. I am your headmaster, Do Good, and I do good. Second half of tonight's lesson will be combat. So first thing when I set up a combat encounter, a lot of people look at, okay, what CRs match what's a good source for that would be Donjon. You could see, okay, if I have 4 level 4s, what CRs should I be using against them? I take a bit of a different approach. I like to look at the scene. Say the characters are in a forest, and they're all like level 4. Going through the handy dandy monster manual, there's a decent amount of things that fit into a forest, but not everything might not like work with what you envision the story to be like.
You won't find a kraken in a forest puddle.
That, and there are some forest creatures that you just might not see being part of your world. One creature that I've used a few times is called the Treant. It's a tree person. Now, against a party of level 4s or 5s, that CR is a little on the high side. However, because like everything in D&D, as the DM, the rules are more of the guidelines. You can modify a creature to fit the proper challenge level of your party. So, worry first about what fits the scene, and then you can modify things as you go to fit the party.
Mm-hmm.
Because CR, I've also noticed, especially if you have a very combat-heavy party, it is one of the most inaccurate measurements of what actually constitutes a challenge in combat.
Yes. CR works good as a basic. Getting further into it, you will run into some serious issues with any player at the moment they begin to either get inventive or begin to know well what they can do and what they can do does.
Yes. So I modify the monster as I need to, and I write down what those modifications are. I also don't just do it willy-nilly. I go do it in a system. First, I look at the hit points. Is this going to go down in one round? Do they have a lot of DPS casters? Like, is the wizard going to cast Fireball once and the campaign's over and the combat's over? Or is this thing so tanky that we're going to be here for an hour and they're only going to get him down to half health? So first I look at that to see, okay, where should his hit points be? After that, I look at the armor class. How easy is this person to hit? Is he a beefy boy, but easy to hit? So even though he's gonna absorb a lot of damage, he's still gonna get hit more often than not? Or is he someone that needs a higher AC so that the fighter with extra attack and action surge and a +9 to hit won't hit with all 4 of its attacks? Or maybe with a +5 or 6, like normal, like levels 1 through 5 have. Maybe an AC of 18 is too much for them to hit. Maybe you want to lower that down to 16 so that they have more hits on it, so it's a little easier. Then I look at the damage dice. Are they rolling 1d6 and adding a modifier? Are they rolling 2? Do they need to hit harder, softer, whichever works? And then the hit modifier. Are they hitting too easily? Do I not even, as the DM, have to roll the dice? I know I'm going to hit any member of the party? Or is it the other way around where I can only hit the party if I roll like a natural 20, which I have had that once. It was with one member of the party. I had to roll literally a natural 20 to hit him.
One other thing that I would add before that is determine what the purpose of your combat is. Is the purpose to give them a challenge? Surely to give them a combat? To further the story? Or one that I've not seen too often, but have used myself, is the purpose to make them run away?
Combats, no matter what, should not be to kill your party. You could give them the unbeatable foe that it's very obvious that they should be running away from. But make sure you give them opportunities to run away from them. Otherwise, you're just doing a TPK. And players will die in combat. It's happened to, I believe, all of us. We've killed a player at least once. But it's not your purpose to kill them. It is to challenge them. Is this a small early encounter in a dungeon that's going to make them just use up a little bit of their resources, like their expendable spell slots, take a little bit of damage, maybe use some of their abilities that they get on short or long rests? Or is this the boss battle that's supposed to really challenge them, make them feel like if they can't manage to do this battle, they might actually die? Teaspoon, you do realize you are muted.
I knew that. I wanted to see if you were paying attention. No.
Of course.
No, I wanted to, just saying that. Sorry, I had to just take a quick call. That's all. So.
No worries. And now that you're back, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I'm officially a year older.
Congratulations, you've accomplished another revolution around the sun.
I am level 24. What do I get for leveling up?
Existential crisis.
Extra back pay.
No, that's after this level. That's level 25.
Extra back pay.
That's the ever approaching dread.
Knee pain increase.
I thought that was level 50.
Funny, I must have gotten that early then.
Receding hairline.
Okay, so back on track. Building your encounters with all these in mind. Yeah, we'll call this character development. It gives you a lot to play with, and the Monster Manual, Mordenkaimen's Tome of Foes, Volo's Guide to Monsters, all those lovely books that have lots of cool things to throw at your players, give good basic stat blocks that you can follow. And you could either follow it to the letter, or you can modify it as you see fit. Don't be afraid to say, like, I'll flip to a random page. Of course, I flipped to a page that has no stat block.
The absolute irony.
The absolute irony. And of course, I complain about that, and I get 4. Hey, it's a raid from Adventures and Initiative. Thank you for raiding. We're here to teach people how to DM.
Yeah, my chat's not loading, so I can't see Jack. Are you going to work Twitch, or am I going to have to throw this phone across the room?
Hello.
Hello.
Alright, so I apparently turned over to the method section of the book. So we'll just go to the
Methods.
first one, magma methods.
Lovely creatures of 2 elements each.
Ooh,
Now, Now we'll definitely get into more creature stuff in more advanced ways later.
yeah.
But just looking at the magma method, I could see its armor class is 11. If you want to give them more of a challenge, you could always say, "Hey, the armor class is 12 for this combat."
Yeah.
Make
You
sure
can
that
always
the
do that.
entire combat it is 12. It's got an average of 22 hit points. You might think that's too big or too little. Maybe you want these to be one shots and dones, like they're just little flies flying around. Or maybe you want them to be actual threats.
This is where little post-it notes come in handy, where you can just put a little post-it note slip on the number and just like write over it with a pencil.
Yes.
And then when you're done, straight out.
Yes. What are the things today?
That's how the monster manual slowly accumulates this horde of post-it notes until you just can't close the book anymore.
Yes. Or just when I write down in my DM's notebook the encounter, I write in the changes. So I'm just looking at it, you can see what you need to change based on your party. Another thing that you need to determine is how many creatures are you going to throw at them. Now, this will be determined in 2 ways. First is, how challenging do you want to make this? Because obviously, more enemies, higher the challenge. The second thing you need to keep track of, be aware of when you make this, is more enemies, more for you to keep track of. Beginning DMs, I suggest just giving them not a huge amount of creatures, but make sure that those creatures are modified how you want to run them. Because sometimes just keeping track of 11, 12, 13 initiatives can be very confusing, as you're not just keeping track of what your creatures are doing, which now have their own initiatives, but you're keeping track of all the other players' initiatives. So it's something to keep in mind when you're planning out how many creatures to throw at them.
Yeah.
Just a like the tip, if you want to run multiple creatures, if you have say you have 5 fire elementals and 2 air elementals, when you roll initiative, just roll initiative for 1 of each type. So like your fire elementals all go at the same time, your air elementals go at the same time. That way, that's going to help keep track of multiple monsters if you want to run like a big combat. So if you want to throw 30 zombies, no, that'd be ridiculous. But like if you want to throw like 10 zombies at your players, have them all go at the same time. That way you don't have to have individual initiatives for each one.
I would write out their individual actually, but under the same number. Like give them the same number 12 on initiative, but write them all out so that you could say, okay, zombie 1 went 2, 3, 4. Because if they all just go on 1, you're going to look at the map and say, okay, which zombie did I forget about?
Well, I mean, you number the zombies.
Because I've done that.
1 through, like you number the zombies 1 through 10, and you roll initiative. You get a 12 on initiative. Well, all 10 have a 12, and then you just go down the line of 1 through 10, and then you're good.
Yeah.
Keeping track of combat can be a struggle.
Piece of paper and pencil. Just decide if you like. Obviously, I know Roll. If you're on your different websites like Roll20, obviously keeps track a lot of that for you with your initiative order and everything and all that rubbish. But what I always find is quite useful, just to have that little notepad with a pencil. Just remember everything, note everything down. That famous line: "Take notes."
Yes.
Yes.
Take notes.
On that subject of initiative, keeping track of initiative is a little bit more than just, okay, whose turn is it right now? A good thing to do is to let them know who's on deck. Where if I was DMing for Glitch, Teaspoon, and Words, I could say, okay, Words, you're up. On deck is Glitch, then Teaspoon, so that while Words is doing his turn, Glitch and Teaspoon can prepare what they want to do, think about what they want to do, so they're not... When I come down and say, okay, Glitch, it's your turn, what do you want to do? He's not staring at his sheet and then the board and going, I don't know.
When in doubt, fireball.
Please do not encourage that. I already have one player who tries that.
That could work, but what if he's not playing a caster?
When in doubt, swing at the closest thing near you.
But that's a friendly!
Oh well.
Oh,
Got a high armor class, right? No, I'm the wizard. Well, get ready to dodge.
Yeah. So they're able to get a little bit of time, a little bit more of a heads up. Especially in a more stressful encounter, they're not thinking, okay, it's going to be them, then me, then that guy, then that creature. They're going to be thinking, oh shit, we might die.
Mm-hmm. Especially if they're thinking more in character than they are out of character.
Yeah. And especially this will be more common in newer players. They will get wrapped up in what's happening. They're not able to think too many steps ahead. But to keep the flow of the game going, especially in combat, which even just 2 rounds of combat, like just 2 rounds of everyone getting 2 turns, can take like an hour. You want to keep that flow going. And one way to help with that is to definitely give them that heads up. The other way is, as you get to be a better DM, you can familiarize yourself with their sheets. I love using D&D Beyond # not sponsored unless, because you get to, as the DM, go into all of their sheets, see what they can do, read everything. And if I get to someone's turn and they're stuck, even with 2 turns ahead of time, knowing, okay, I've been on deck for 2 turns and I still am unsure of what to do, because maybe they're a new player, or maybe someone did something game-changing the turn before that kind of screwed over what they thought they were going to do. I can look at their sheet and say, okay, well, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what your options are.
Goodness me. God, I keep yawning.
I'm sorry I bore you.
No, I'm knackered.
Is the headmaster boring? Heaven forbid.
Oh, his
That's
brown
it.
suit again. Those bloody patches, they should colour them up. Oh, there's someone saying hi to you, by the way, Glitch.
I see that. Hello.
We have a fan.
Fan? I don't have any of those.
I do. It's upstairs, actually. It's got 3 settings.
Those settings are high,
Double attention.
faster, no longer on the wall.
Right. So back to combat stuff. Another thing to keep in mind when you're running your combat, you don't have to be Matt Mercer. We are going to say that a lot throughout probably a majority of these lessons. You do not have to be Matt Mercer. Describing what happens gives a sense of immersion to the game, but not everyone can give that details of that short sword slices under his armor into his stomach, blood dripping down onto the ground, and just all that lovely crap.
There's some points where you'll also be doing description in combat and combat roleplay, where occasionally, per se, you went over the RPG consent form earlier, and someone's not comfortable with gore getting too extreme. That can limit your potential in doing that. Finding ways to do it around that can be a challenge.
Yes. As you're getting a feel for things, you could say something simple of your sword slashes their stomach for 8 damage. It gives them a little bit of detail, but it doesn't go overboard.
Yeah.
That's just as valid as what I said about the whole blood and guts and crap.
I don't think I was there for that, but yeah, I'm just gonna sit there and nod my head.
Smile and nod.
Smile and wave, boys. Just smile and wave.
I like that term. Yeah, so do I. That's why I said it.
Yeah. I personally have a lot of experience to draw from. I'm a little bit better at describing how martial things work because I got 10 years of martial arts experience and 4 years of stage combat.
All right, now you're flexing.
Well, he is the headmaster for a reason.
I am headmaster because I said so as a joke, and
Sorry.
you guys went.
Is he the PE teacher?
This was meant to be a joke.
He's only the headmaster because I let him.
That is very true. He didn't want to add headmaster, Mr. Dr. Professor Words, because that sounded a little too long.
I mean, he could always put governor, and then he would be above you.
Really, it should just.
We have challenged the Game Raider girl.
It should be King, Mr. Dr. Professor Words, but you know, whatever.
Bold of you all to assume. I
Oh.
don't bring assumptions into this, because I did not assume.
Ivy, you know you're a simp. It's all right.
But for who?
I'm British.
I do good.
That term wins every time.
But I have the words.
Anyway, using that experience along with the fact that since I was a kid, I've watched a shit ton of anime. I'm using those experiences to describe things.
I dare you, Ivy. I dare you. We own this space.
Don't make our superintendent come in here.
Just all of a sudden, boop. Now
You get the college dean in here, and we're all going to be in trouble.
So,
Careful, Ofsted's coming.
oh dear.
All right. Well, back to combat now that we're
Yes.
get the train back on the tracks.
Okay.
Try
So,
to keeping combat running
from
consistent.
your own experiences, you could describe something literally. I've described someone using this spell lightning bolt as someone used just like the fucking Kamehameha. Like, that is completely valid and works. You know what? You let us do this, Ivy. You gave us a platform. And we will abuse it.
Oh,
Do
jeez.
not make me come on this stream right now.
Oh my.
Ooh, should we keep pushing it?
Just remember I can disconnect your cams.
That's unfair. That's just like straight up not fair.
That's cheating.
Never mind. Now, where were we? Because we lost track of that rather quickly.
The only thing we're keeping consistent here is the amount of derailment rather than talking about combat.
Yes.
This is why. It's like even talking about combat can be boring. Not
Getting
saying that
into
you are boring. I'm just saying like,
Combat can be
we're
boring.
trying to
So
help- we're trying to help you with your combat.
I will say though, as a DM, you've got to find what you like because covering just you saying that, combat bores me.
Yeah?
It does. I'm not a huge fan of combat. I prefer roleplay, like completely. I always keep it 60 roleplay, 40 combat all the time. I obviously will alter it to the players, but that is my standard ratio. I dislike combat.
You're a little heavier on the combat than I am. My standard runs like 70-30 on a light
Really?
roleplay day.
So the way I want approach combat is I want my combat to enhance the story experience. So I try not to throw combat for combat's sake. And I want them to be thematic in a way as well, to where it is interesting. And like, I like the combat that I ran like last Wednesday. If you know the creatures that I ran, you would know that they're out of place. So like, I want to do things like that for my players to see if they pick up on that kind of stuff. Like, wait a minute, these creatures are typically in these environments, but why is it here? So like, because that's going to add a bit of a mystery of what's going on as well.
Well, sometimes.
Yeah. I do throw combat in every now and then. I have a system when they're traveling. Especially if I know it's going to be like days of traveling. When they set up camp, I have them roll 2 different rolls. First roll is like their perception roll for keeping watch. And then the second roll is a d20 that they roll against me. If I get the higher number, some creatures that would be in the area emerge from the night. Whether that turns into a combat will then be up to the person keeping watch.
That's a definite thing where combat breaches into like house rules and such, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it depends on how you want your game to run, and as well as what your players are looking for in a game. All right, so as you're running your combat, there's a lot of different moving parts to this. There's where are the player characters, where are the creatures, are there legendary actions, are there lair actions, are there timed effects such as maybe there's reinforcements on the way. There's a lot of different things that you need to keep track of. Another thing is, as Glitch said, there are house rules that come into play. A lot of times, a player will ask, like, okay, if I use this spell in this way, would I be able to do something different with it? I've seen that a lot in a stream on Mondays that I mod with, Offbeat Outlaws. Their sorcerer does a lot of different things that technically aren't rules as written to the spells, but the DM allows it and is consistent with what he allows. So you have to make sure you keep track of those house rules, what you'd like to rule different things as.
yes. And speaking of rulings as well, a definite thing to keep in mind of is critical rulings, whether you follow the generic approach or if you are trying to go with a more defined house-driven approach where you have something special happen on critical fails or critical successes.
Yes, I personally have my own house rule for critical failures more than successes. Successes is usually in combat very straightforward. You double the damage dice. I know Words has his own method of critical successes. I actually like his method. I'm not going to use it, but I like it. Well, I'll use it as his player, but I won't use it as a DM. But
for critical
yeah, we'll get to your critical successes in 1 second before I forget my critical failure. So I like giving the possibility of failure that has actual consequence other than you miss in D&D. So when a player of mine rolls a natural 1, there's a consequence to it. In a melee attack, say Glitch is trying to make a melee attack on Words, and Glitch rolls a natural 1. Words then gets a counterattack. because of just how bad he missed. And I will describe it as he swings his sword, overextends it, and the tip gets lodged into the soil beneath their feet. For a quick second, Words is able to take a opportunity to attack and make a counterattack. For ranged attacks, I have them completely roll a new attack and say Teaspoon's trying to attack me at range.
Yeah, come on then.
Come at me, bro. And rolls a natural 1. I then have him roll a new attack and say he rolls a 17. I would then, as the DM, say, okay, randomly pick someone within the same range. Words, does a 17 hit? As that arrow then goes towards Words. And I would describe it as you are pulling back on your bow to shoot an arrow, a gust of wind knocks you to the side as you're about to release, and the arrow flies towards Words. He bats it away with just a glance and gives you the fuck?
Buckshot. Everybody.
And it
medieval settling suddenly has the
crits.
invention of a shotgun.
Yes, and Words, I know you have your own critical success.
Yeah, so I like critical successes to be successful. Like I want them to mean something. So if you are going to critically set success, I will give my players max damage on their first die, essentially. So if they have a D8, they get 8 damage plus their modifier, and then they get to roll a second one. Like so, each critical hit's going to hurt, but that's also on creatures. So like a critical hit's going to be critical. When I do critical fails, I do the same similar things with consequences. I don't necessarily do extremes of where whatever you're attacking gets to counterattack, but I will do things of like maybe you hit your party member instead, or maybe you lose your weapon, or maybe you trip and you fall and you're prone, things of that nature. That's so, like some form of effect that's going to hinder you your next round.
Yeah. And obviously what Word said, everything that affects the players will affect the creatures. And some people might say it's a flaw. I think it's amazing part of my critical failure for melee attacks with counterattack is you can nat 1 on your counterattack. And you can end up getting a counterattack on your counterattack.
I counter your counter.
I have actually had a player nat 1 to then get a counterattack on them. That was a nat 1. They counterattacked for another nat 1, and then the final counterattack was a crit hit.
Ouch.
It's actually what during the combat that I was running last week. The creature rolled a nat 1, and so I had the creature lose their weapon.
This keeps going back and forth. Ha 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 ha. Twat.
It was really funny, and like, especially in like a stressful encounter where they were like, "Oh my god, we're actually gonna die." When they saw that back and forth, they're like, "Okay, we're probably not gonna die, but this is a big challenge."
Okay. Considering the topics we've been going over, I actually have a question for our other DMs here. A topic of D&D that I've seen tends to involve both roleplay and combat about equally, if not leaning one way or the other, are chase scenes. How do each of you particularly handle those?
So how I do chase scenes personally, I do them more as events and not necessarily a combat situation. I will set up different situations and scenarios to where they may have to do saves. And depending on if they succeed or fail to save, something happens and that gets them further or closer away from whatever their goal. So it's not necessarily initiative order. It's just more of their like point of order, like who's first, who's
okay, so more of a role play lean for yours.
Yeah, definitely, because a chase scene, like you can run it like a combat situation, but I think that's going to slow it down and make it less impactful. So, allowing the players to kind of role play that out, and then I just throw things at them, sometimes literally.
I mean, like, as when I do a chase scene, typically what I'll do is obviously your typical running is like 30 feet into it. So I do it as if they're pursuing a particular person after a battle, I get everyone to roll d6s, and whatever you get will depend on how many squares you move. So that the main guy that chasing might roll a 2, so you can only move 2 squares, or someone else might roll a 5, so they get a bit closer, and then it gives it sort of like an interesting pace, if you like.
Okay, so variance and pace. What I'm after here, though, more is whether you lean towards a chasing being more based in roleplay or based in as a combat. Because I try to balance them out.
I would probably be in the middle, because I'm still going to allow shots on them. I'm still going to allow that sort of thing that will go down an initiative order like we're in combat.
Okay.
But I will allow them to shout and call orders and what have you.
One feature I'm aware of, I believe it's actually considered it's in the D&D books for the most part of running combats, is you have an initiative order for a chase. However, if you have a complication happen, say someone makes a bad save or something, it's something that I do in mine as well. The bad save doesn't affect the person that makes the bad save. It affects anyone behind them. So it works especially well if there's multiple people in a chase. Like I jump this box, but the complication, it shoves it further into the way and blocks another person's route. So they have to find a new route.
Or if you're a Goliath, you just go, I go through the box. You know what? I go through the box. Okay, roll me strength. Do you even need me to?
Yes, because you can still. So that's another interesting thing is like, skill checks. Like I don't do crit fails, crit successes. I do. If you roll a 20, it's the best you can possibly do given the situation. Or if you roll a 1, it's the worst you can possibly do given the situation. It's not an automatic failure or an automatic success. So he may try to go through the box, but he may make it through the box, but they might get like a trip and stumble or it breaks and a piece of it lodges in their leg and they take damage, whatever.
Nails through the.
Take a potentially simpler example for that one. If I roll a critical fail or a nat 1, I'm making a sandwich. Perhaps by accident, instead of failing to make the sandwich, I put the mayonnaise on the outside.
You put the mayonnaise on the outside.
Yes. So we'll definitely get into more mechanics and stuff like that in a different lesson. For chases, I like to keep it in like a marching order. I'm like, okay, I know what order you're in, so when things happen, I know who it affects where. I don't like to do initiative order because I like them to be able to just like work with each other. But like, I try to make sure everyone gets one action before someone can take their second action.
So more of a combat lean there, sort of, to an extent at least.
Kind of trying to mix it up so that like they could still do their actions as they can. Please don't die, teaspoon.
I'll try not to. Sorry, that actually the fact that it could have picked any sauce, but it had to be mayonnaise and it had to go on outside the sandwich.
I actually have done that before.
Oh,
I mean, when you have regular white bread, it technically the side you put the mayonnaise on becomes the inside.
I tell you what I have done.
You could accidentally put it on wrong. It's a whole thing. But let's get back on track.
That or you have ADHD and it takes an hour for you to make a sandwich. Yes. Anyways, back to Jack.
I would say try OCD where you got to literally lay the lettuce on, and if it just peeks out of the crust, you're like, oh. Snip that off. Anyways, continue.
So marching order in
yes, for chases. So I like how the mechanics work for the combat's actions, where it's simple enough. It's something that happens within the course of 6 seconds. So it fits to a chase scene of, okay, every time you move a certain amount of time, you'd be able to do a certain amount of actions. But I don't like sticking to an initiative order. I'd like people to be able to work off each other and work together and react to what other people are saying and doing. So the marching order, I need to know so that I know, like, when an obstacle gets hit, if it's a pile of boxes in the middle of the road, the first person in the marching order is the one that has to deal with it first. I can't say, hey, person at the back, what are you doing about the boxes up front? But other than situations like that of, oh, people are catching up to you, or there's traps, pitfalls, whatever, people can work in their own ways. Kind of like us getting super derailed and Ivy, like, considering canceling us.
Please tell me everyone just saw the arson in the chat.
I would like to roll arson, please.
Okay, so Ivy rolls arson. We all roll our arson saves.
Wait there, let me get my dice. Ivy equals arson. Oh no.
Yes.
Does that technically mean because we're getting streamed on her chat that we're all now arsonists?
Accomplices.
Yeah. You know why? It's because we're so hot.
Okay, that pained me.
Ow.
I just gave you a compliment. Just take it how you want.
Just 4 nat ones.
I see how it is.
Wait, 4 psychic damage. Pff, I take 4 psychic damage when I wake up. Who kidding? I wake up. Sunlight.
All right.
What?
We are in rare form tonight. By rare form, I mean everyday form.
Pretty much. What is the next? I was gonna say, what is the next point? On.
I got sidetracked when writing my bullet points, for that was the last bullet point I had written down.
All right.
Was the crits and stuff.
So just for like the sake of trying to summarize things that you've gone over, combat, that is one of those areas that a lot of people may think is boring, especially with 5e. 5e mechanically can just be very dull. And as a DM, trying to find ways to improve combat experience, that's going to be tricky because some players are just not going to be into it. Some players are going to be really about it. And you that's part of that communication that we've talked about many times. Communicate. Like, cannot be a successful DM without it. So figuring out what your players enjoy most is going to be the best thing for you. Try to add roleplay elements to it. Encourage roleplay elements. try to balance combat in a way that is going to be challenging but not deadly. One thing I was wanting to note earlier when you were talking about the challenge rating is 5e's challenge rating system, honestly, to me is a bit wrong. Like, you might be able to run a combat challenge rating that would be considered deadly against your party, and they just steamroll it.
Yes. Yes, I've done that before.
Combat challenge rating is a ballpark number.
Yeah. So, and the thing is too, like, if the intention is for it to be challenging but not deadly, adjust things in the middle of combat. Like, if your party is like if your party is getting slaughtered and you're like, oh crap, they shouldn't be getting slaughtered, lower the HP of the creature that they're fighting mid-combat. Like, they don't know.
Like, I have modified so many things mid-combat. Like, if I think, okay, this is too easy for them, I'll mid-combat just give the enemy extra HP, or just
I don't even do that.
Give them general damage resistance, which like is basically extra HP. But
I would say the last time I had to cope with my party just steamrolling my encounters, I remember having like 5 or 6 super battle droids, and they were taking on, well, obviously the party, and the party just plowed through them like they were nothing, and they weren't supposed to. And I'm thinking, okay, what do? I know everything that no one expects in Star Wars. Droidicas, where are they? And they just sent 2 rolling down the corridor. I was like, ooh, these are quite powerful, actually.
Another point I would add with the CR is with that, it's both a ballpark, but another point is what the difficulty level of your campaign you're looking for is. And that goes back to what we covered in earlier, and we'll cover more later with campaign setting. If you're looking for a setting of a campaign that's supposed to be difficult in general, that will change your ballpark. If it's supposed to be easier in general, that'll change your ballpark.
Yeah, but so yeah, kind of moving on from that, add in different storytelling elements to it. Like for me, like I like combat to have story relevance to it. I like to add some things to my combat to where, like, if the players are paying attention enough and they ask enough questions, they may realize that the creatures that they're fighting aren't necessarily in an area that they should be, which could add some intrigue. Things of that nature, just kind of like, just because you're in the forest doesn't you have to use a forest creature. What if you throw a lava monster at them? Like, why is a lava monster in the forest? Well, then there's a story element that you can play with.
As long as that actually fits with your story.
Yeah, that's,
depending on how much you're improving, anything can fit with the story.
True, but like...
No, just say, I am God.
The encounter should fit your storylines, whether it's something that's a side story, a main quest thing, a backstory thing. The monsters fit. Like, when I was running a campaign in person back before the age of COVID, I originally actually took over that campaign from another DM because they wanted to still play the same campaign. And I felt like it was easier to take over that. So in that campaign, there was an orc army that was fighting against the party and the country that they were in. I don't know if you know this about orcs in the Monster Manual. They're weak as shit. And the party was like level 12.
Wait, are orcs that weak? I've never actually used orcs.
Normal orcs in the player's hand in the regular Monster Manual, they suck. There's like the orc war chiefs that are cool and the orogs that are cool. Like they have some decent stuff, but even then, like the party was steamrolling through everything. So I had to keep with the orcs. Thankfully, I forget whether it was Volo's Guide or Morning Kaiman's. One of those has extra types of orcs, I took those and I modified them to make them proper challenges to the party.
Yeah.
Because the story called for orcs, how I wrote it out along with the previous DM. But the orcs, by the book, gave 0 challenge to the party.
Yeah. So like balancing your challenge rating is, gotta mess with it. Gotta, you also have to check your players. Do they have a lot of high, powerful items, that kind of stuff too?
What do they focus on? Range, DPS? Are they a bunch of tanks?
Yeah. So like, that's where like homebrewing monsters can come into. Don't be afraid to take 2 different monsters and Frankenstein them together, and see what happens, and make your own monster. There's plenty of homebrew stuff out there that you can throw at your players that will be very interesting.
Yeah.
The
encounter should primarily fit the party. Primarily fit the story. Secondary fit the party.
Yeah, just don't
find
ever
the outline of the creature. Like, okay, I gotta find orcs.
Yeah, don't do a silly mistake and put a Tarask up against like a level 2 party. Don't do it.
I found orcs, but they got an AC of 13 and hit points of 15, and the party is very combat heavy, and they do a lot of DPS, and they're level 13. So maybe I want to up that armor class to 18, and maybe add a 0 at the end of that 15 hit points.
Yeah. So. Don't be afraid to adjust things. Combat is one of those areas that is just, it's going to be hit or miss. Don't be discouraged if your combat doesn't go as well as you planned, because you never know. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen with combat. Your players may roll 3 nat 20s in a row and, just absolutely destroy what you have set up for them. So, like,
but it's very malleable.
It's one of those things that, like, you just try your best to make it as interesting as possible, especially for the players that aren't necessarily fond with combat.
Yeah.
That way, like, they're still going to be engaged. Like, and that's one of those things that's really hard to keep players engaged in with combat, because combat can take a while. It can, like, especially if someone, like a fighter, is like 30 attacks because they're doing action surges and things of that nature, and they're rolling like 500 dice and doing all this damage, and then like your next person is like they're a warlock and they Eldritch Blast. Like, there's a big difference in flavor of characters and things of that nature. So just do your best to tailor your combat to your party and make it interesting and keep them engaged and like on their toes. So they have to think.
That's also where the amount of creatures you throw in can come into play. If you know that like combat's boring to your players, or like elongated combat gets boring to your players, the more creatures you have, the longer turns will be. It's going to be more turns between the end of their last turn and the start of their next turn. And especially when you have people like fighters who can do like, okay, I have my attack and then my extra attack. And if they're, I think, like level 16, an extra attack on that, and then action surge gives you an attack, an attack, an attack. And then they have a bonus action. And then they have movement.
Yeah. So just, as a DM, try to streamline everything as possible. As we mentioned before, like just trying to reiterate things, so we can we're probably beating a dead horse in a lot of things right now, but just
we're doing what?
So for the DMs who have players that like combat, because I actually have players currently that like combat, and the party that I had that fought against the orcs liked combat. Don't be afraid to embellish things. Don't be afraid to let them embellish their own actions, like how Word said with Caleb in Critical Role, taking the sulfur in one hand, back one on the other, and slapping it together and doing the whole enacting how he wants to cast his own spell. They feel important when they get to either say what they're doing in such bravado, or hear their DM say these amazing things that they're doing. I had in my in-person game a monk who would do flurry of blows a lot, and because the way I would embellish it, he would get really into it. I would literally see him going along with what I'd say and my motions, sitting at his seat while I'm saying, "You take your quarterstaff and slam it to the left." He'd literally be going like, "Yeah," and like he gets more involved in it the more involved you get into it. Just make sure that you don't say it in like you keep it short enough so that it doesn't take 5 minutes to talk about one turn.
I was going to say something, but lost my train of thought. Yeah, just trying to probably just I'm assuming be a good place to try to wrap it up, and unless there's any other main points that we have. Any questions out there? If anybody has any questions on, we will more than happy to answer.
You got any we've got a Q&A.
Combat is, one of those things, you really like it or you really hate it. Just keep doing, what you can, trying to keep it interesting. Don't be afraid to experiment with different creatures and homebrew, and maybe the purpose is to kill your party and they wake up elsewhere. Do different things.
Or if it's a combat not meant to kill your party, but they're kind of rolling shitty, maybe you could fudge some rolls so that you roll shitty too.
Yeah.
See, it's a little bit difficult, obviously, if you're on roll 20, but you can always give some false minuses in there that you've got to apply. I always do that. So, like, if I want to fudge a roll, I go, "Oh no, I rolled that wrong. It's actually blah blah blah."
Yeah.
For whatever reason, they don't know what's going on in the background. So.
Yeah, and I usually, as a DM, I hide all my rolls except my nat 20s because I like to brag about those.
It's nat 20 lifts DM screen. Oops, no, you're not supposed to see that post-it. Nope.
Like they could read my handwriting.
True, that is giving them a lot of credit.
I'm sure it's not that bad.
He's a DM.
Yeah, mine's not that bad-ish.
Yeah.
Like I say,
for the basics of combat, there's definitely not too much more we can get into without beating a dead horse, as Glenn said.
Or getting into much more complex stuff.
I'm going to have to use that term in my own time because I really like that. That's different.
Have you never heard that phrase before?
It's in America.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
Beating a dead horse. Yep.
So yeah, I think we've covered today's topics, haven't we? Yes.
Yeah.
Don't seem to have any questions coming in.
Yeah, no, true. Would you? I'll tell you what. I actually have a question for you three. I'm currently just editing a few stats for my tomorrow's game for the two big bad evil guys, as it's the final game. Woo! And would you say it's okay to add immunities for certain things? Add things. I've taken a lot away from them to kind of dumb them down a little bit. Just because, like, what I wanted to base them off, they're quite high-level characters in the book, but I just wanted to, like, drop their AC and HP a bit. But I've basically added an immunity in which has been an ongoing thing throughout the campaign of a character that literally just does it all the friggin' time. And he basically charms everybody. Because he has an ability. He basically has an ability where as long as he talks to someone for a minute, back and forth, they are automatically charmed and they have to do exactly what he says.
Well, that's somewhere personally where I would come in. with the aspect of being potentially challenging to the party, especially if you have a character that's doing that consistently, like you mentioned he is. You can go, okay, this is a character I need him to not do that to, or I need it to be more challenging than just something as simple as that. So adding an immunity there is something that would make it more challenging. So I would consider it acceptable.
That's fine then.
Play with things like, just to kind of revisit the rice situation, like, you know, because it was running the bit essentially, you know, when they rolled the attack, instead of just straight up missing, they actually connected with him, but because the attack failed, I just had it to where he just took it and didn't react to it, and it didn't move him, it didn't do anything. So like, it gave that thematic appearance that, oh yeah, maybe he is immortal, but like, really, you know, he's probably just like faking it because they hit maybe just weak enough to where it hurt, but it didn't, you know, make the NPC react.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that you can play with anything that you want. So add an immunity if you want a character or like an NPC or a monster or whatever to be immune to charm, because that's going to be thematically and story wise better.
Yeah. You see, because my character, one of the big bad evil guys, he's got a very, very high level spell, which I'm going to avoid using because he's already an overconfident twat. He thinks, I can beat these with my sword alone. La, 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 la. But the thing is,
we do have a question in the chat for once we get a moment for it.
Oh yeah, we'll come to that in just a second.
While they're talking about it, Glitch, you and I can ask the question to give that.
But no, so like, he's got a spell where I am legit not kidding. This is where this game is not quite finished yet, so obviously there is a lot of kinks. There is a spell in this book, a 9th level spell, that can cause 30 D8 damage. And he has that. But it is localized on a singular spot. So it's basically like an insta-kill. Which I might use to my advantage because there's some role play that I have in the background with another character, which we could play on. But I'm going to avoid using that spell just because of how sheer powerful it is, but I'm probably going to use it at least once or twice. Just because it'd be fun. But yeah, so that question.
Yes, so dealing with a player that keeps ruining the game for everyone. They keep going around killing every NPC. So there are lots of murder hobos out there. Usually they are the entire party, or at least a majority of the party, so that the whole party's on the same page, and that's just you should be adapting your campaign to be a murder hobo friendly campaign, or you talk to your whole party and say, hey, I'm trying to run a game that is not about being a murder hobo. If it's one player going around killing every NPC and it's ruining the fun for everyone at the table, it is your job as the DM to make sure that everyone at the table feels comfortable sitting down, that they don't dread coming back each week, bi-weekly, month, whatever, however often you sit down. You want everyone to look forward to this game, and if this player is doing something consistently that is making these players not want to come to the table, then it's your responsibility to talk to that player and say, hey, listen, I've noticed you've been doing this a lot, killing every NPC, and not only does that disrupt the flow of this game that I've made, but this isn't fair to the other players who want to interact with these NPCs and do more than just be a murder hobo. And if they're unwilling to listen, then that's when you gotta unfortunately play the bad guy and give them das Boot.
So yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to your responsibility as a DM is to set the standard of the game. So if you what I like to do before I start any game is have that session 0 or that pre-meeting with your players, like, this is the expectation I have, like, this is the style of gameplay that I like to do, like, this is what I want to do, but I do ask, like, what do you want to see in a campaign like this? So if everybody but one person is cool with it, and that one person is literally, as you say, ruining the game, yeah, like what our headmaster has said, have that conversation. If they continue being disruptive, remove them.
Yeah, I've had to deal with that recently with one of my players. They rather than obviously something as serious, not as serious, well, yes and no serious in terms of the party, but basically rather than having to go around killing everybody, they would interrupt everyone's turn. And they would go, I wouldn't actually give chance for people to speak, and this went on for quite a while. And obviously that was making people uncomfortable and not wanting to play. So that I had to address with very, very carefully and quite sternly. So, but don't, like, I would probably say don't deal with it in the manner of like being over nice, like, no, it's fine. Be straightforward, be honest, be stern if you have to, and just say, look, carry on doing it. This is what's going to happen. So please, can you stop? And then if they throw Mards out, throw the teddy out of the cot and spit the dummy out, then that's when you obviously go, well, if you're going to be like that, go on.
Yeah, and killing an NPC once in a while is fine. Like, I know a short little man named Rice that needs to die.
Right? Rice is immortal. You cannot kill Rice.
He has a stat sheet now, so that means he's mortal.
Fireball.
What if the stat sheet is he is immortal?
Just because a god has a stat sheet doesn't mean you should try and fight it.
Yeah.
I would say, it is his character. He decides what happens to it, and you can't say.
I will make my character's sole mission to kill Rice.
What?
It will be futile if he's actually immortal, but it will be his sole mission.
Please leave Rice alone. Like, we are so aggressive towards Rice.
He's just a gnome fighter, man. Let him be his chaotic
He started
self.
out by cheating and being very loud about it in the bar. So he has no honor.
And he got yeeted out a window for it.
Yeah. So killing an NPC once in a while it's not like a fireable offense. And sometimes, depending on what NPC you throw at them, they might deserve it. But you also can remind them, if it's not killing every NPC, but he kills an NPC every now and then, that there are consequences to actions, such as killing is normally illegal. Therefore, killing an NPC will make you wanted.
He has been murdered.
Anyways, I think unless there's any other questions, that should be good, right?
Around. Yeah, I think that we can think. Any more? Any of you fancy people?
I don't think I have anything else to say.
Wait, eccentric tea?
You said that, I think, as a joke once.
Yes, and now I have had it. Eccentric teaspoon.
Yeah.
Because that's what you are.
I mean, you are eccentric.
I'm going to say I'm not angry, I'm just eccentric.
Give me one.
I think that's us. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I have leveled up. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right.
So,
till next time.
Everyone, let's just go around, say where you're from, what you do. Glitch.
Who is your daddy, and what does he do?
Okay, I'm not going to answer that question. I'll say who I am and what I'm going to do. I'm Glitch, as I mentioned earlier, Glitch the Music Man here on Twitch. If you're looking to catch more of me, I'll be on again on Monday for certain with a D&D campaign here on Twitch. Other than that, you'll catch me around at these and potentially some other times as well.
You'll catch me. Well, depends on if my upload schedule improves, but you'll catch me on TikTok at Weaponized Teaspoon, literally my name. I'm thinking about starting a stream, so I will keep that obviously updated in these little streams. But for now, you will only see me live every other Saturday.
Mr. Dr. Professor Words.
I am Words for Sale. You can find me TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and on Twitch, but I haven't streamed on my own Twitch for a while. Thinking about doing that. I am also a part of a group called Stream of Many Things, where we have about 5 shows a week, one of which I DM on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern. I also play in a few other games. That One Blood Nerd on Tuesday nights, Sunday, Baxter and Andrew, and Friday also on Stream of Many Things. So you can find my face a lot of places. So I know you like looking at it, so look at it some more.
All right. Okay.
And I am your headmaster do-good, apparently the leader of these chuckleheads. Somehow.
Self-appointed.
He's self-appointed.
Self-appointed, but no one has argued it.
I didn't vote for you.
You're not my leader.
Then someone take over. You could find me at twitch.tv/dogoodhvz. I stream every other Sunday with a D&D campaign I'm a player in. We're doing a one-shot tomorrow at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, which actually reminds me I still have to make a character for that. You'll find my username in the chat of the twitch.tv/offbeatoutlaw Monday night streams as I help him mod his 7Z6 Idiots. Totally better than Dice Cream Sandwich. Bring it.
Leave Dice Cream Sandwich alone. They try. Okay, they try.
Do not make me get Kevin.
I'll take him on too. I don't care.
Bet we can fight. Anyways, finish up your set off so I can go raid Stream of Many Things.
I am on the Stream of Many Things as a player with fabulous Mr. Dr. Professor Words as my DM on Wednesdays.
I'm gonna have to jump in on that just to spam you all in the Twitch, just going hi.
And every other Saturday I'm here. Plus I stream sometimes on my Twitch when I feel like it, and I post on my TikTok when I feel like it.
Yes.
So thank you all for watching. Hopefully we taught you stuff, even though we got extremely distracted. I'm pretty sure Ivy is regretting her decision to be our platform.
Not ever, but I am gonna go send you off to raid Stream of Many Things now.
We are gonna be raiding Stream of Many Things, so if you stick around, you'll automatically be sent into this raid.
Onward.
Wait, are we going with?
Yep, it takes you with it.
Yeah, so
as long as you're in the chat room,
if you're in the chat,
sends
it
you
will take you with. So we're gonna go raid them. And I'm gonna end stream.
Stick around, show them some love. They are all talented people. They're doing what's called a dungeon brawl, so it's kind of like a one-shot, and they're all clerics right now, so they do different encounters and stuff. Should be fun.
Cool.
More clerics, best
Onwards
cleric.
we go.
Just saying.
Boop.
Sally forth.